This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, just thought I'd send you a voice note about That They May Face the Rising Sun, which is a title in itself that's so hard to say that not only will I not remember it, I'll probably start calling it the House of the Rising Sun film by the end of it, and it's going to be hard to even try and think of the name in any capacity as it goes on. It's based in a novel, so I'm presuming that the novel has that name as well, because as a film title it does not roll off the tongue in the slightest, but as a novel, I guess authors love titles like that. But anyway, it stars Barry Ward, which is an actor who's it's a bit dramatic to say this, but a low-key hero of Irish cinema. He's never gone to America as far as I know. He pops off and stuff in Gomorrah. I think he's in this TV show called Bad Sisters as well, which I saw recently, which he plays a character so broad that I forgot he was a good actor, but he's an actor that I like to see showing up. I think he started off in a movie with Cillian Murphy, and Cillian Murphy's gone on, of course, to be one of the biggest exports to Hollywood. Well, maybe not, but he's certainly, in his last movie, Oppenheimer, reached the top of Hollywood. It'd be fair to say. He's certainly not somebody who courts Hollywood, but Barry Ward is just more of a steady actor that he doesn't do many roles, but no matter where he pops up, especially in something like Jimmy Hall, there's a quiet magnetism and quiet charisma to his performances without being really showy and without having traditional vehicles of gravitas like a voice, striking looks. He's got none of those things, but just in how he acts, he always draws you into these characters and plays them charismatically. It's very interesting. I went back and watched Jimmy Hall last night, and before I rewatched it, I had it in my head that he's playing a similar type of character and that they may face the rising sun. But, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, it's hard to remember his performance, but it's easier to remember the character he's played, which is, I guess, what any character actor wants to happen, really, because if you're remembering the actor in that role, then to some extent is still an actor that's on the screen. Whereas if you just remember the character, then the actor's done so much of a good job that it's almost like an actor never played the character. It's just a character in his own right. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, this movie, and I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. It's set in 1980s rural Ireland, which might as well be the 1990s in some parts of Ireland where we grew up. And it's a movie that's steeped in a kind of nostalgia and a type of, I don't know what the word is, detail orientated way that it's very specific to us. I often hear people talking about movies where, oh, they got this right, they got that right, oh, the attention to detail for these things, and it would be an Italian 1960s family drama, or it'd be New York 1970s, and you'd hear someone say, oh, they got the streets right, they got this one right. I've never really been privy to that in a period piece. I've certainly been privy to it in a movie set in different cities that I've visited, where I can say, oh, they've got that city right. You've talked about it earlier in Robot Dreams a few weeks ago, where you said that they get the New York right just through the drawings. And I believe you spent a bit of time in New York, enough to know. So in this, first of all, it's just had details about Ireland that I completely forgot. That would have been exposed to me at a very young age. For instance, people sitting around the stove in the kitchen, and there's not really a living room of sorts, and they'd be smoking around that stove, and they would extinguish the cigarettes out on the stove. It's a small detail, but it's something that I was born in 1985. It's something that I would have only really experienced maybe for the first 5 to 7 years of my life. And obviously, I was doing a baby for some of them. So I don't know if it was just seeing a detail like that and the central ethos of this film. And maybe I've got, for the first time in a while, not a longing for Ireland per se, but a longing for a simpler life. That I could tell that this movie is working on me in a magical way. Like I'm primed for this movie in a way. And it'll be interesting because you are the litmus test to this movie, because you're from the same era, you're from more or less the same geographical area, although yours was even more remote, just to hear your thoughts about this movie. And I guess to set it up, it's about this character played by Barry Ward and his wife, I can't remember her name. They have moved from London to this rural part of Ireland. Never really says where. Seems like it might have been filmed in Wicklow, but I can't be sure. And they're just happy about living a quiet life in a way. And the movie that gets referenced in a significant amount in this conversations that we have is in a way similar to Patterson. The wife character, I think she's German actress. She's happy to do her paintings and her art, and the people ask, you ever going to make money from these paintings? And she's not really too bothered about it. And Barry Ward's character is a writer, and he's happy just to sit outside and write these different stories. And they ask him what his novel's about, and he's not really sure. When I say they ask him, I mean the locals. And there's something about this movie that is it's a balancing act that it got right for me. And again, I'll be really curious to know what you think. So there is a rose-tinted view of Ireland in this movie in a way that I would see in indie movies, not to the same extent, but the way I've seen American indie movies, like again, Little Miss Sunshine, that we mentioned recently enough, where it's just a little bit quirky to the point where I don't believe this community. Well, because this is framed through the perspective and the viewpoint of a writer, it's a difficult one for me. Where when we see all these old villagers, and he's looking at them and he's smiling. He's very content. Never has there been a man so content to know he's in the right place at the right time in a movie, which of course doesn't really give us a sense of conflict or anything, and not that a movie needs a sense of conflict, but the central character is very content in this movie. He's almost scared to admit how happy he is, and he's happy to look up at the sky and observe the trees and the seasons. It reminded me a little bit of how my dad says he explains the world, and my dad did these series of pictures where he would go around, not as part of any documentary, but as an artist, because he paints, and if he saw an old farmer in a field, he used to stop the farmer and ask him, "Could I take a picture of you?" You could imagine how that would go, and it would go in the the nice Irish way, the way that what's nice about the island, where a good humor, a little bit of suspicion, and a little bit of a sly comment on top of it. So he did a lot of curation of faces of Irish and Ireland that are forgotten. The people that, I guess, as the years go on now, will be less and less frequent. And this movie is steeped in that type of character, and it has a real admiration for those type of characters. And you'd wonder, is it a little bit too sweet? But at the same time, because it's through the perspective of this character who's a writer, I was able to totally get on board with the film, that this is how he's seeing it, and he's very fond of these people. And then it became less about that the movie is shaving off the rough edges of these characters. Now, of course, I think the movie still does a good job of spending time with these characters, which I'll get into in a minute. And it made me feel sad, actually. It made me feel sad that this was a part of Ireland that I ignored, I guess, and wasn't in the right frame of mind, like yourself, where we wanted to get out of Ireland, and Ireland was dead end. It was void of culture at the time. There was very little you could do. My family used to drive me to the airport to play video games, because that's the only place you could. And I remember telling you recently that for someone's birthday party, one of the big things you could do is you used to be let into McDonald's kitchen where they're making the burgers as some type of massive thing for a kid's birthday. You know, America had Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. We got to go in the kitchen and see minimum wage people make sandwiches. So I'm very well of the dire and desperate feeling of wanting to leave. I remember one time in Limerick as well, there was a guy skateboarding, and I think he was from America or something, and he just broke his skateboard because he was doing something different. People used to be made fun of for wearing jeans. It's like, you gotta wear tracksuits, man. Like, there was so much of that type of Ireland that I'm not able to reckon with. And to see somebody in 1980 find a beauty in Ireland that at least is there in this film, and at least it's something that I appreciate more as I get older, the feeling of a place like that. But as they say about nostalgia, can't really be trusted. But to live in a movie that celebrates as well as shows the sadness to an area like that, it made me sad that I never took the time, or because I was very young, to talk to these figures that are gone now. And it makes me sad that not to say I left, because I'm happy I left in many ways, but that I have this feeling I've been trapped in London now myself, where I've got this job and I can't really leave the job, although of course I perfectly can, but there's a lot to be considered where I'm with my partner, and it's a big risk. Got 2 cats. So I get one particular character's plight in this movie really well. And so yeah, anyway, so this couple, Barry Ward and the German actress, which hopefully you'll tell me her name or I'll look it up later, they are basically around their house doing their thing, living their partisan life, and these various characters show up to the village, to their house, and they're characters that I've just seen so well and heard so well in a shop, or just saw a cycle past me on the bike, and they've got the details of the bikes right in this movie as well. I think everyone had these bike. I could bet money that your mom had a bike like this, because my mom had a bike. And there's the various characters. There's this guy who doesn't say much, and we find out that he was born a bastard, and I think he had to work off a farmer's land, and we find out because he was born out of wedlock. Now, I don't remember any story like that in Ireland, but it wouldn't surprise me. And just the way that character and the actor plays him is just a quiet solemnness, where he plays his character like he was always told he was nothing, and it's almost like he has a shame, like Pat Short's character in Garage, to an extent, where he's not able to articulate particularly well. And just to see him sit there, and there's a scene where he's at the wedding where he just has more dessert, and there's one character who notices, and she gives him an extra dessert. There's just moments like that where it reminds me that there is a community spirit, and there is something about living in a smaller village or town where people will notice you and people will help out a bit more. Like, it's very hard to do that in London. Just yesterday I gave a homeless guy a drink, and it was only because he came in and asked me in the shop. If I see a homeless person outside, then, well, I'm not sure what they're going to spend the money on, and I can't really do it every day either. But in a small village, there's something to it where, in a way, it's bad that everyone knows each other's business, but in a way, you're a lot more able to help each other. And that movie has a spirit of that, where the spirit of that, should I say, where Barry Ward's house is a focal point for all these different characters. And there's another guy, I can't remember his name now, they got very generic Irish names to try and remember, but he's got a beard. He's a bit more of a Roy Keane type of sharp tongue, a little bit miserable type of demeanor that comes over to the house, and he's got a lot of problems. And you eventually see his house on Christmas Day, where he's just steeped up, curled up in his bed because his brother died. And again, it does have those real elements of Ireland as well, where around that time, what the fuck would depression be? No one would know what depression would be. And to see a character go through it without being able to articulate it is very saddening. And of course, we see that same character later on at the wedding of one of the characters, and he's the life and soul of the party, having a drink, having a great time. And that's something else that you would have seen a lot in Ireland, and presumably rural towns as well across the world, where everyone's putting on a face to an extent when they're around a big crowd, having a drink, the life and soul of the party. Then when they go back home, there's an extreme loneliness. And then, yeah, so many people said showing up to the house, and I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, everyone's fucking showing up to this house. But then I realized, yeah, these are all old people. That they're kind of the last vestige of an Ireland from a different time. And the reason why they like coming around to this house is because there's a bit of new life in the community, because surely all the young people would have left, especially in the 1980s. They would have left to England, America, places like that. There's a lot of immigration, or migration, should I say. So probably even to have a new couple in the town is a great interest, and there's a great loneliness of many of the characters in this movie, and that's what I like as well. I even though this movie is sweet and kind to its characters, which I think it should be, there is that undercurrent of rural loneliness still. And there's a scene later on where that guy with the beard, he's depressed. He sees his friend coming back from London, and they do this type of goofy routine to each other. They do this little choreographed little dance, and I'm thinking, okay, now we've gone fully into magical little, cute little Ireland town thing. But then you realize, no, they used to act together, and they used to be in a touring type of acting group. We never really understand what it is fully, but they're actually reenacting something that they used to do when they see each other. So the movie is very smart that you get these nice moments that are a little bit comical, a little bit kooky, but then they're grounded in reality. And they're grounded in something. Whereas if I met up with a friend and our main friendship blossomed in a time of doing a specific thing, then I might reenact something from that time when I see him. And that character that returns from London, played by Sean McGinley, I think that's the actor's name, I really identified with that character. Now, not that I want to go back to Ireland, but there is this often feeling, having left in, when did I leave? 2005 first, and then 2008 permanently. So close to 20 years now, where you're so disconnected from your homeland, and you've never really settled in the place you went to, and you went there for a particular reason to begin with, and you're almost in a limbo, except, and that often crosses my mind. My family's alive now, but let's say in 20 years time they'll be dead. Well, hopefully not, hopefully they'll have longer, but let's just say they are. Then I'm with my partner now, but supposing something happens there, I'm not saying that it will, but let's just say hypothetically, there can be a situation where I have absolutely no one here, and my parents are dead. I'm not going to move in with my sister and her family, am I? Because, not that because they wouldn't want me, or not because they're bad people, but they've lived their life without me, and there's no point to accommodate an extra person. It wouldn't really fit in a way. So seeing this character coming back from London, he's really old, and I often see Irish people here by themselves in London, alone, going to the same cafe by themselves, and I always wonder their story. I always wonder, how are they here alone when in Ireland they probably would at least be known in their community? And but again, you leave, and then you can't really go back because it doesn't exist in the same way. And that this movie does that in a really good way. And seeing that character, he comes back once, and then I think it's the Patrick character with the beard, he says, oh, it's the biggest mistake you ever did leaving for London, and he left to be with a woman that he's no longer with, and he's just trapped there. And then he loses his job, and he tries to write a letter to his brother saying, can I come back? And then the Barry Ward character has to write the letter to say that, oh, we love you, come back, but we just can't accommodate you in the house, and you're always welcome at the holidays. And that's just tragic. And we never see London, and I don't know if it's because I live in London, but There's something about the visualization anytime somebody mentions London as a character that's in stark contrast to this beautiful fucking John de Florette Irish version village where just everything is so beautiful and so quiet and so calm. And then when we hear that he's over in London, and maybe it's because the character also has that type of feeling to him, that you just feel concrete isolation and distance, which is a lot different to the rural loneliness that's sometimes explored in this movie. And then there's also a type of other London plot, I guess, where this guy shows up and Barry Ward character has him in his car, he's driving them back, and he's trying to get the German character, the German wife, he's trying to get her to go back and run a gallery in London, and you're just thinking, don't do it. Don't do it. Appreciate your life here. It's like that Interstellar scene. Don't do it. Don't go. Don't go. And luckily she doesn't, but there's some really nice pieces of detail where this guy in the car, it's never said, and this is great character work and great glances and great scene management, where you feel like the Barry Ward character is very guarded around this character, and you feel like this London gallery owner, he never says anything that makes you think he looks down on this community or this area, but just in a few subtle glances and a few things that he says, where even when he says, oh, someone's at the door, that you feel like he's looking at it in a different way to the Barry Ward character, who's a writer. It's more of a looking down on these people to an extent, where he says this person is like a character from a Russian novel, and then the German actress says, oh, there's no characters here, these are real people. So there's a sense that this type of Ireland, to that type of Ireland person who's in London running the gallery, is something that's, I don't know what the word is, but something not to be laughed at, but something to be, you know, when you talk down to someone in a kind way because you think they're less than you, when you see people do that, where they almost infantize them, where they're like, oh, isn't it lovely that you did that? I feel like he looks through Ireland in that way. And when he's asking the Barry Ward character about his book, Barry Ward is very reluctant to share details because he feels like he's been probed and he's been judged. It's a great way to get across a character like that. And later on, Patrick asks him about a novel, and he, even though he doesn't have the answers to what his novel is about, he's a lot more open because he feels the authenticity in these people. And there is definitely a authenticity about Irish people where you'll know who they are, for better or for worse, within 5 minutes. And that's how I prefer my people. So this movie hit me right. It hit me in every kind of way I was primed to watch this movie. In the heartstrings, in the nostalgia part of my brain. So I'm almost corrupted in a way to the way I would normally analyze a film, but then again, I'll watch an action movie and I'll be judging it based on the fun factor, not stripping it apart. So in that sense, this movie from an emotional factor, and I don't mean like I was sleeping around crying, but just the vast, complicated array of emotion that this movie managed to conjure up. That's what I thought was a pleasure. And it's a very quiet movie as well. So I do wonder how someone that's not from Ireland, how inclusive and easy it is to get into a movie like this. But then again, as I said, Patterson I'm not a bus driver from America, and I was able to speak to the spirit of that movie. But yeah, we'll see when you get to it. No rush, I suppose. And talk to you later.
Hey man, it's a Saturday morning here now. It's my son's first birthday, so we're just having a bit of a quiet day here at home. And it's been, as you're aware, outlandishly hot, sunny weather lately. And today it's raining and it's colder. And I'm walking out now to just do a little bit of grocery shopping. And it is what I always describe as Irish island weather. Namely, a sort of a drizzle in the air where it's like a little mini raindrops that are kind of floating about hither and thither, up and down, you know, not like just coming straight down. I think we will get heavier rain soon, but it's that like kind of very humid, wet, cold, light drizzle kind of weather. And although the movie That They May Face the Rising Sun is mostly shot in either sunlight or very bright overcast weather. I don't remember much rain across the film, but the country of Ireland is one that I associate with rainy weather. So it's somewhat fitting that I'd be sending you this voice note now. Apologies if it's bad sound quality. I'm trying to cup my phone here to avoid too much wind on the mic, but yeah. As I said, it's my son's birthday, so this is probably my only window to send this voice message today. Watch the movie. Just my mother just called there now, so let's cancel that voice message. Yeah, watched this movie last night. A friend of mine who grew up in the same area as we did told me it was brilliant and put me onto it. Otherwise, I don't think I'd even know this film existed. I'm sure if you were in Ireland, you would have heard about it when this film came out. As you referenced in your voice note, we're both decades gone from the country, for better or worse. And yeah, you know, I hear about sort of maybe like bigger sensations or ones that have kind of like cult movie appeal, but this is like a quieter little, very low budget character drama, and it just didn't kind of break through. Saying that, I feel like if it had the right distribution and the right marketing, there is a world in which this finds its way to kind of cinephilia renown. I'm not going to say it has the same broad appeal as something like Past Lives, but it is in that that realm of like when you do character drama, like quiet character drama, Kelly Reichardt style, so well, it can actually sell and it can get fairly big. But the other element of this, I suppose, which you kind of referenced there, is like how much of the appeal of this film is in having a keen understanding of rural Irish life and maybe also a reverence for it, which I think kind of go hand in hand. I don't think there's many people who like deeply understand rural Irish living and have no reverence whatsoever for it, even if they're like, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want that to be my life. I think it's hard to see no charm in it. That you referenced there at the end of your voice note that this movie just hit you completely right in all the ways, and that you maybe feel a little biased or you're a bit unsure about your judgment on it. Like, how much are you just predisposed to like a movie like this? And I feel the same way. Like I loved this film, really, really loved it. And I watched it with my wife, who's from Madrid, so that's not Ireland for the record. And it's not the countryside, it's a city of 4 million people. She is absolutely a city girl through and through. Rural Ireland is like the Amazon rainforest to her in terms of like how exotic and unusual a world it is. Obviously, in her long relationship with me, she's now spent a lot of time in rural Ireland. So, and you know, become somewhat enamored by it, but it is very much an alien, like, as you said, this film gets the details right. It's a tapestry of very, very familiar details to any Irish person, at least of a certain vintage, but possibly just any Irish person. It, you know, certain, especially rural Ireland, you know, moves slow. Like, you referenced that this film is set in the 80s. I had it pinned down in my head as 70s. It's never really said. I don't think there's references to like pop culture or politics or stuff that would kind of give it away. But if you go into a house in the Irish countryside and you never see anything other than the countryside in this movie, if you go into a house in the Irish countryside in the 60s, 70s, 80s or 90s, you're seeing the same stuff. It's the same, like everything inside the house is the same. All the clothes are the same. All the cars are the same, more or less. When I look at the interiors of older people's homes in this movie, I literally stood exactly in those very rooms growing up as a child, and I'm a child of the 90s. So I think it's to at least 100 years worth of Irish people, this is very, very familiar territory, and possibly still to Irish children today. I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess it depends on how much of a sense of community they have with the older people in their area. But yeah, I was very, very predisposed to love this movie. Very, very predisposed. And after we watched the film, we watched it mostly sat in silence, like we did, you know, say the odd word here and there, but and even in those occasional words here and there, there was clearly some sort of chasm. It remained to be seen how deep, but there was some sort of chasm between our ways in which we were interfacing with the film. I remember one sort of tip of the hat to that was at one point, I think it's Patrick is the real grumpy character. Patrick, when he first sort of leaves after, you know, saying to, is it Johnny? He says like, you know, it's just the worst decision you ever made leaving, or you ruined your life leaving. It's something pretty harsh, and then it kind of like flares up, and he leaves. My wife turns to me, she's like, "Why do they hang out with this guy? Like he's awful." And I was like, I mean, I've been incredibly charmed by that character the whole way through the movie. And yes, he's a grumpy motherfucker, but like, you know, every person in this movie, including the German girl, Kate, like every person in this movie is 100% dyed in the wool artifact of rural Irish living. Like that, they ring so true. And there's so many people people are coming from very different places, I don't mean geographical places, I mean like kind of like philosophically, spiritually, you could even say, but personality, psychologically, emotionally, and characters like Patrick, you know, we would have interacted with ad nauseum, you know, especially I used to like hitchhike around everywhere, and so I'd, you know, very much be in the throng of like older people and just, you know, regular people of the countryside. And there was certainly cantankerous, grumpy, you know, barely ever get like a smile out of them older dudes around that you know, they had a lot of value to them as well. And I don't know, I found him very charming. And the fact that my wife was more like, well, why would you hang out with him? That to me is almost like a city way of looking at it, where it's like you sort of select your community. You're surrounded by millions of people, and from those millions of people you sort of cherry pick a range of people, and that is your family, that's your community, and that's the little community you've made. And I'm not trying to sort of be cynical about that. Like there's a lot of pleasure in that, but obviously this movie is set in an environment where, well, why would you hang out with him? Well, because he's there. Like, he's one of the people that you're saddled with, essentially, and you don't even, unless they're like they really wrong you in some way, you kind of reconcile with everyone in the environment and take what you can from them. And obviously these characters are artists, and they're looking for they find a lot of inspiration in the sort of the common man, the day-to-day life, the sort of understated living that these people exhibit. So there is also a lot of stimulation to be took from a character like Patrick. And if it's there for me as an audience member, that's certainly there for a writer who's in his sphere. So, but yeah, I think after we watched the movie, after we finished it, we had a massive conversation about what we had just seen, and we had certainly seen something very different. And so when you talk about how sort of in the bag you were for this film, I'd say that's true of me as well. But this movie is, and you said I was the ultimate litmus test. I think this film is the ultimate litmus test of how you feel about the countryside, about community, about relationships, about socializing, about like many, many things. You could watch this film. In fact, I think the film is at its strongest when it's understated and not much is happening, and it's just a sort of character study. And then in the third act, where we get more of a major plot happenstance, it almost felt like unnecessary to me. It's like, I kind of wish, now granted it's an adaptation of a novel, so they're not sort of making up the plot per se, but that's where I felt like, oh, okay, well, this is, not to say that there isn't interesting drama content that comes out of that, but I think I preferred the film in the first two acts personally. Now, we watched a film a couple of months ago called The Peasants, which I adored. I think you were maybe less enamored by, but if I remember correctly, you did enjoy it. And I said how watching this film had me really like pining for the countryside. Again, that's a film that shows community existing and simple life of like communing with stunning nature every day, and a slow pace and stuff like that. But it's also like one of the bleakest looks at like how toxic a rural community can be, and it's almost like a Lars von Trier movie in that way. What happens to the protagonist of the film is like, a nightmare situation through very little fault of her own, but just because of the dogmatic, like rumory, jealous, bitchy kind of nature of that kind of really small, tight community back in the day. And you said, well, Jesus, if you're finding any romance whatsoever in this, if you're finding any desire to live, go to these places, then you must really be fucking missing the countryside, because if you get it from this movie, then you get it from anything. And I thought about that as I was watching this. It's like, this is a film about two people who have chosen to be there. This isn't a limitation of their like birth, where there's nowhere else they could possibly be but here. They lack whatever would be needed to escape. They may or may not be satisfied with it. No, this is a film about a writer and an artist who have selected this environment as somewhere that they find like conducive to like calm and inspiring living, and having them as your sort of point of view character, and sort of weighing up the value of that life, right? So not the value, not just objectively the value of like living in the countryside, because 90% of people who live in the countryside they're sort of born there and that's kind of where they're from. But like it's showing a portrait of like how if you can make it work financially, like what would it be like to make this choice to live there? So it's kind of a bit of it's almost more related to that question that you and I have of like, should we move to rural Ireland in a way? This isn't a question that we're like spending much time turning over in our heads on a daily basis. It's something that we like is kind of probably always going to be there in the back of our heads till we die. There's a line in the movie is that there's no place you know better than where you grew up. And I think everyone in the world probably has some, like where they grew up is somewhat weighing into their concept of like how they could live their life. And because this film again is about people who've like chosen to be there, and they've made this kind of like intellectual decision of like, okay, this is the value of this place, this is why it would work for me. I think that makes it almost like one of the most interesting films about choosing where you want to be. There's obviously that subplot of like potentially moving back to London and stuff. So we get to see within the film this like double down, this reaffirming the decision of doing this. And when we got to the end of the film, my wife was like, it's a very romanticized or oversimplified movie in the sense of like these, pure, educated, cosmopolitan, sophisticated artist types going to this place where everyone's living this like miserable life and like just be helping everyone. And it's like, I don't know, kind of maybe like it's not the like the white savior thing, but it's like that's the kind of like realm of criticism. And I was saying, well, look, I'm from the Irish countryside. It's a very low populated place. If you go to the Irish countryside, the people that are living there are poor, well, relatively poor in a global, like on a kind of like Western European scale, poor older people living like a simple life from a bygone era, rich, educated Irish people, loads of foreign people like German or whatever, artists, farmers, like people running a local business, like the guy who runs the garage in this movie. Like this is these people, the two main characters in the film, the writer and the German artist, they're not like anomalies in this movie. This isn't like Jane Goodall type situation. They are like absolutely part of the fabric of who you would find if you went anywhere in rural Ireland. Certainly in the 90s, but from my knowledge of my mother's sort of testimony, even going back to like 70s, 80s, if you went to a small rural area in Ireland, you'd find a number of foreign couples coming from a sort of sophisticated background, urban background and stuff like that, who were there because for the very reasons that we can kind of assume these characters are there. They're there because they find the people and the landscape inspiring, right? And so if you want to say that it's like it's overly romanticizing that dynamic, then I think that to me, the counter to that is like, no, this is exactly how it goes down. Shitloads of people who are like from working in galleries in London and stuff like that wouldn't have a positive dynamic with like simple country living folk, right? There would be, like you said, maybe there's like a condescending thing like we see with the other gallery owner who comes by for tea, or there would just be like a cultural mishmash or something. Like it just wouldn't work. They might have come just for the nature and not for the people or whatever. But shitloads of people, and I can say this, I've seen it 100 times before my very eyes, shitloads of people do make that move, do take on that pursuit of like having this exact dynamic, and they follow through, and it works out exactly like this. So this I don't think this film can be discarded as like, yeah, but it wouldn't really be as pure and as nice. It's like, no, wealthier dude who writes novels and writes books, going to the countryside and wanting to help out with like, you know, any sort of local jobs that are needed from the farmers, or like, you know, likes the constant footfall of people popping in and having chats and having cups of tea and smoking a cigarette, and like exactly what we see in this film. That is like not only realistic, that is like literally what happens in the countryside. So if I wasn't Irish, I might see this and be a little bit more skeptical of it and go, you know, it all seems a bit too easy. You go to live in this place as a writer because you find these people inspiring, and then it ends up as easy and inspiring and frictionless as he could possibly dream. But no, it's not actually unusual. I mean, I know that my mother's from small town Ireland, from Longford, but she moved back to rural Ireland from living in the UK, and like, you know, certainly it was out of reverence for the countryside. She instantly befriended loads of elderly people, like exactly like the characters in these movies, and exactly like them in the sense that some of them were struggling emotionally, psychologically. Some of them weren't at all struggling. They were, you know, completely at ease with their lives. And obviously, I mean, this is certainly doesn't need to be said to you, but if there's ever any doubt anyone have, like, I think it should be dispelled. People would be incredibly receptive to this couple. They wouldn't be like, oh, you rich out of towners, you're going to be looking down at us. Like, no, it's like there's not many people in the Irish countryside. So I think all the characters in this movie and all the dynamics are very, very, they ring incredibly true, like perfectly true. Like beyond, I would go beyond they ring true. I would say they are familiar to me in the sense of like every person in this film and every dynamic in this film I've seen 1,000 times over. So that was one big difference. And then the other thing is, like she had said, you know, they've gone to this place where people are living this kind of like downtrodden, tragic life, and they're just able to help out. It's like, well, not really. Jamesy and his and his wife Mary are living happy and good, and they're content. Yes, they have this specific tragic incident that happens with Jamesy's brother towards the end of the film, but that's like an incident. That's not their life. They're fulfilled. The other guy who owns the garage, his life, like he's thinking about retiring, you know. Then he hooks up with this girl, this woman who runs the hotel, and they have a lovely wedding, and he's fulfilled. Most of the characters in this film, and then you've got Bill, which is an interesting character. Like I said, we didn't have much exposure growing up to people whose life had been condemned from birth because they were born out of wedlock. We didn't see that because we're a bit younger, right? So this is where I think we might have seen people like that. In fact, I'm sure we did, but we weren't aware of that aspect of their history. But we also can know, just academically, we can know from like hearing about it and stuff, that like if this movie is set in the, let's say, early 80s, and this guy's probably in his 60s, when he was born, we know that being an illegitimate child would absolutely have, especially in the countryside, put him down he's not becoming like president of the country, right? So you could say he's a tragic figure, which I think is a fair claim to make. But the other thing you could say is the unfortunate life that was dealt to him within that paradigm, right? Within those limitations, he has community, he has friends, he has like quite a comfortable and sustainable life within this unfortunate unfairness, right, that's been dealt to him. Now, Patrick is more of a tragic, like a miserable character, right? There's real misery there. He is not happy. But you make a movie literally set in any environment on planet Earth, there's going to be unfulfilled characters and unhappy characters that are like not where they're supposed to be. Joe, is it Joe? Johnny, I think, is the brother that comes home from London. He's struggling, right, with his fulfillment in his life, and we can speak to that. That's something that we could probably talk for about 20 hours on as a subject matter, having we're both literally him except minus a couple of decades. The characters that are unhappy, I don't think paint a picture of they've gone to a location, a geographical location where misery is just inherent. I think they've gone to quite a positive, or at the very least neutral, environment. Yes, there's loneliness. It's the countryside. It's older people, as you said, young people have migrated, etc., etc. But like, it's not like this movie is set with them having gone to some war zone or some environment which is just inherently a bad state of affairs, and they're like the pure brilliant oracles of wisdom and light and assistance and stuff like that. No, they're hanging out with the people there, and they're very calm and compassionate souls, and so they commune with them in, I think, a positive way. But it's also not, they're like not saving people's lives, or it's not like Bill, the guy who's carrying buckets by the end of the movie, he's like doing a degree at Oxford University because this writer helped him unlock that. It's not that kind of a movie. So yeah, it all rang very true. I realize now I've just been like mounting a defense for like 25 minutes, like the lady doth protest too much. But I think it's just because I can see that accusation being leveled at this movie, and it kind of was by my wife. Lightly, she liked the film quite a lot, but she wondered if it was overly simplifying that dynamic. And I've seen this a lot whenever you've got a movie that is centered around a sophisticated, middle-class, educated person, and then a working-class, simpler person. That movie gets absolutely torn to shreds. Even Green Book, which like did it, sort of flipped it by making like the black character be the educated, sophisticated, erudite one, and then the white character be the, sort of like yob or whatever. That still got absolutely eviscerated. Now, granted, it won Best Picture at the Oscars, but I think it's a very risque territory that not many films would be willing to brave. Maybe this because it's an adaptation of a novel. It was kind of that was. It's not like they made the decision to do that in a sense, but I think if ever there was a film that gets away with that and that like is very difficult to criticize, I think it's this one. But again, I think that's partially just because I'm from rural Ireland, so it makes more sense to me. But to talk a little bit more about the film, it's a low budget film. I don't know anything about the people who made this or anything about the making of it whatsoever, so I will be interested to find out more. But although it captures a lot of Irish scenic beauty, I think if you just go down to Ireland with like a camera phone and start like just waving it around, you're going to capture stunning scenic beauty. It is incredible, the Irish countryside. So I wouldn't say that this film visually is anything too noteworthy or special, like, or anything from a sort of filmmaking standpoint. It gets out of the way. It reminded me of Mike Leigh quite a lot. Like, it kind of just, the filmmaking calmly gets out of the way of the characters, and it's only interested in sort of showing you the dialogue, the interactions, how people live and stuff like that. It's not interested in delivering some sort of bravado filmmaking, distracting, stylistic experience. The acting was sublime across the board. There isn't a bad line reading. Sometimes in the film I was like, is this acting? Like Bill and Patrick, it's like, are they acting? That's too good to be acting. But then that's always like, imagine like being like this incredible actor working in like local theater and stuff like that for decades. You finally get a big movie and people just dismiss it as like, he couldn't actually be acting that good. That must just be him. Always like feel a bit bad about saying that, but it definitely has that feeling. It's so accurate to the people that's trying to depict that. I'd like to see these people in interviews and stuff. Perfect acting, perfectly pitched. And as you said, the details of Irish life. I watched this film, I said, at every minute I'm watching a turn of phrase or like you said, a particular little detail where I'm like, yep, I haven't thought about that for a while. And I love the poetry of Ireland. I love the lyrical way that people say things, like just even like little things like when Mary's at Johnny's wake, and she's obviously very remorseful of the fact that they turned him away. She says, "We gave him the door," and it's like that. You could say we didn't let him stay with us, or we turned him down when he asked to stay with us, right? A functional sentence that sort of, completely easily and quickly communicates the fact of the matter. But if you say we gave him the door, it's like it only takes a millisecond longer for your brain to sort of do take this visual image, this like not literal thing. They didn't hand him a door, but to sort of like to do that dance. That's the way Irish people talk, and hearing it like constantly in this film is just such a pleasure to see that like really artistic and lyrical and evocative and sort of storytelling turn of phrase throughout the film is a real pleasure. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the beginning of the film is a bit restless. I often am for my favorite films for the first 10-15 minutes. Slower films. We've watched a bunch of Wim Wenders movies recently. I remember feeling a bit restless in a lot of the opening 10-15 minutes of those films, because you're like, what are we doing here? What's the point of this? We're just watching a bunch of people just kind of live their life. There isn't really like, what is this? Like, where's the story? Where's this going? And then when you realize, oh no, this is the movie. This is brilliant. There's not going to be a kind of catalytic moment that it makes it become a genre film or whatever. It is just painting a picture of their lives. Once that becomes clear, then I adore the film from that point onwards. And obviously, if I rewatched it again, I would adore it from minute one. I do think, as I said, that when Johnny dies, now it's kind of nicely told the way they go out for a drink at the bar, and he wants to just pop out to the shop for 5 minutes. Like, you wouldn't leave me, would you, Joe? And there's all these moments of people extending themselves, like Bill when he wants Joe to walk him down to the bottom of the gate and he can't ask it. And there's just so many scenes in this of people unable to express themselves, and Joe or Kate like being able to bridge that gap. And like, don't worry, you don't need to, don't say anymore. Like, I got you. Like, someone says something in anger to them, and they're like, I understand this, and I don't need to lambast you or like hold you accountable. I'm going to be gracious in my interaction with this individual, and just be very empathetic to like their limitations emotionally and so forth. So there's so many great interactions like that. But the scene where he dies, like obviously he heads off on the bicycle, and it's kind of like he's come home to die. He tells his tale about how he's like fully set up now as like a super or whatever in this like apartment in London. And is that true? Is that not true? I don't know. He's been turned away from what he really wanted, which was to live back in the house with his brother and Mira, which I know it's perfectly reasonable for them to turn him down on that. But he's spent, and And then we have Awake, and I was kind of like, is this Wake just here because it's another kind of cultural institution we can show? It's a climax to the movie. It's something happening. Of course, you know that Patrick's going to be furious when he all sees it, and he is, and it almost became a little bit too predictable for me at that point, a little bit too like, okay, we're going to do Awake now. Okay, we're going to do Patrick's angry, and then when they do the final scene with that the title of the film comes from, about like laying him in the grave facing the western sun and all that, it felt like that end cluster of the movie was just a bit more contrived and a bit less like slice of life. Now, of course, old people die in the countryside. I'm not saying that this is like, you know, there's as the garage guy says, you know, I've been to 3 funerals already this year of like mates I grew up with. So like, I'm not saying this is that weird of a thing to throw in to the end of the movie, and it does at least give the film an end, but it dropped down ever so slightly for me in terms of my engagement with it. I was just more engaged watching the tiny details of people's lives rather than like bigger plots, machinations. But yeah, loved this movie. I did really recognize the main actor, and I was like, spent the whole movie trying to work out what I'd seen him in, but you're saying now he's not really been outside of Irish cinema, so I probably just recognized him from Irish TV growing up, I'd imagine, or maybe even commercials is another possibility. But yeah, really, really great stuff, and curious now to check out, or to like look into what these writers and directors have done. Of course, it is an adaptation of a novel, which, you know, you can't, unless you're going to adapt another similar novel, then the next film they make might sort of be nothing to do with it. Also produced by the University of Galway, which was, you know, a first. Not only have I never seen that about the University of Galway, I don't remember seeing that with any university globally as a producer. I'm sure I have at some point, but yeah, interesting little tidbit there.
Yeah, I suppose the real litmus test is actually your wife then, not 2 Irish lads who very much understand this world. The actor you're referring to is Barry Ward. He's in that movie I recommended you recently. Well, I didn't recommend it to you, but put you on to with Will Forte, called Extraordinary. And he's also in Jimmy's Hall, which is, if you ever wanted to watch a movie where Bishop Brennan from Father's Head plays the exact same character in a serious movie, opposite Barry Ward, doing great work, written by Ken Loach, and can't remember who it's written by. It's directed by Ken Loach anyway. It's written by his normal partner, didn't it? His normal writing partner, which the name was gone for me now, but that's a very good movie as well. Nowhere on the level of this movie, but if you want some more Barry Ward performances, that's probably his other big movie. And yeah, some of the people very much immerse themselves into their role, and I would very much like to see them in interviews as well, just to see how much of it is perfect character casting and how much of it is perfect people to fit the part. But I know the guy who plays your man who lives in London or England, maybe it's not London. He's Sean McGinley, who's a very famous Irish actor, and he is quite diverse. So maybe the actors we are less familiar with are also of the same quality. Well, regardless, they absolutely nailed their parts here. I really like the point you made regarding in the city you get to pick your community a lot more than in the country, where the community is very much the people around. And there's another detail as well. I don't know if you caught this or you just forgot to mention it in your voice note. Barry Ward, whatever the actor's name, and his wife, they didn't just pick this place. I think he grew up there. At the very least, his uncle is from there, so he would have been very familiar with the community as well. So even though he is very much a focal point of these older people and they come to his house and whatnot, maybe they knew him when he was younger as well, and knew his mother and knew his father. I don't know how much you can hear this now, as I wish I could record this voice note from the laid backness of Ireland instead of the manicness of London as I'm walking down to the cinema. So it could have been very much that already are familiar with him. We can't meet his mother or then his father, so they obviously had a built-in relationship. But you're right, this is madness. This voice note is madness now with all this noise going on. But anyway, Jesus. So hopefully you can hear this. Who knows? We'll see if Adobe can get rid of some of this sound. But yeah, and characters like your man who's very much cantankerous, as I have been accused of many times myself. You kind of would warm to somebody like that, wouldn't you, though? Especially if you're Irish and you're predisposed to the temperament and you know the type of character. It mightn't mesh well with if you met that person from another culture, but if you understand the Irishness of it all, I much would rather be friends with someone who's going to tell me their mind. Yeah, they might be rude, but for them, it's not them being rude, it's them being themselves. They're saying what's on their mind. I'm much more drawn and fond of people like that, where yeah, they might say something like you fucked up your life, but at least they're not thinking it and holding it back. And then when they do say something kind, it's genuine. And when they do bare their soul to you, it is genuine. There's nothing but genuineness about that guy. And as someone who lives in England, where the temperament and the demeanor is very much the face of politeness, and you never quite understand maybe what people think at times. Not all of them, of course, I'm massively generalizing, but people like Patrick are who you want to talk to if you're someone like me. And as long as you don't take offense and take them in the wrong way, then you can very much be part of the community of somebody like that. I very much, like you, was a little bit less interested in the finale and the funeral and the digging of the grave to get the title in. But like you said, it's from the book. And I guess that is the symbolic death of rural Ireland that we had seen dying around us in the movie. It's nothing but old people. We hear the lost people alive. And at the end of it, we're literally gathered around a funeral of that type of Ireland. So I guess that's where the symbolism, maybe that was very much in the book, will hammer home. Whereas in the movie, there's very much a meandering look at different seasons and different parts of life. There's even scenes of this around Christmas where he picks up Patrick and he's trying to bring him to dinner, I think. You can feel that frost, can't you? You can feel the cold of that morning. It's just realized so well. And it's not like there's an abundance of snow or anything like that. You can just feel that snap and you can feel that rust of that gate. And that's where this movie, with its lack of flashing, directing and whatnot, really helps. And do you know what this reminded me of as well? It reminded me of a bit like The Holdovers in spirit. And I don't mean so much in the way that Paul Giamatti's character is reluctant, but it is about a community thrown together and people needing guidance from a certain person and not being able to articulate why. And whereas in The Holdovers, it's because they're young students and they don't have father figures. In this, they don't really have the guidance of younger spirit and some fresh life in the community, and they very much value not Patrick's perspective, but the Barry Ward character's perspective. When he's writing the letter, they say, "An educated man." And I guess the main thing is there's a difference between having a rose-tinted view of this type of Ireland and showing it from somebody's perspective who would have that view naturally. And I think that's maybe some of the conflict that your wife was having, whereas it wasn't showing Ireland to be this. It was showing Ireland through one person's perspective, mainly in the writer's character. And then the other things that we noticed is because we also have a perspective to Ireland separate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my earlier voice note was very rambly, and I lost track of some of the stuff you had said, but I meant to emphatically agree with that point you made about this movie is deliberately shown through the perspective of someone who has, you could call it rose-tinted glasses, call it what you will, but a very positive, optimistic, and inspired perspective on this life, this slow pace of life here in rural Ireland. So it makes sense, but it's also not like a sort of exoticism movie. Haven't seen Eat, Pray, Love, but what I imagine that movie to be like, it's like his view of life in rural Ireland is completely accurate, but it's also kind of a glass half full view in a sense where he likes it, it agrees with him. And I said the exact same thing to my wife last night. It's like, this is not an objective movie. This is a point of view movie about people who have found quite a charmed life there. That we talked at great length about Perfect Days last year, the Wim Wenders movie. And that isn't attempting to show a life that's just like, throw anyone into that life and they're going to have a lovely time. It's not making the claim that the setup that the person in that movie has is just inherently a good life to anyone. It's going, here is a person, a particular specific character for whom this life is very agreeable. So yeah, I couldn't agree more on that front. It's a little bit later in the day here now. We had the birthday cake and all the rest of it. I had a lovely day, and I spoke to my mother, and I mentioned that I'd seen this movie. She had seen it and loved it. She had seen it in the local library. I can just imagine like a bunch of old folks crowded around some tiny little TV watching this. She said that she was, before she watched it, she was like, I don't know how they're going to turn this book into a movie because nothing happens in the book. And she's very well read, and she's probably read like every noteworthy Irish novel, I'd say. And answered some of my questions about like, well, this towards the end of the movie where it becomes a bit more contrived, only by contrast to what happens in the rest of the film, is that sort of them just like obeying the book. And she said that like the book is very much just like nothing happens for the whole, like, obviously it's eventful on a micro level of like people's facial reactions and comments they make and changing their posture and stuff, but it's not like you wouldn't read that book and go, well, this writes itself as a movie. So yeah, they seem to have done a really good job, at least on the opinion of my mother, who's a fan of both the novel and the movie. I wish I was a reader. I often watch a film now and really love it, then find out that it's adapted from a novel, and then be sort of a bit saddened by the fact that I just can't read books. I just don't have the attention span. I really, really struggle to do it. So I know now that as good as this film is, it's almost certainly the case that the book is better and just more detailed. We both really appreciate all the little details in this, like when he goes to collect Patrick on Christmas Day and carries his shoes out for him while Patrick crosses the muddy bit outside of his house, the wellies. And you can just imagine the book absolutely being laden down with detail like that. But truth be told, I'll never get to it. But yeah, and I agree with what you said about like this sort of cantankerous character that it has that sincerity and that authenticity. I thought about it afterwards, like, why do I like Patrick so much? Well, you know where you stand with him. He says exactly what's in his mind. You're right, we've moved away from Ireland. That's not something that we get really anymore, of like complete transparency in the people that you interact with. And even in Ireland, you're not guaranteed it, but you certainly get it much more so than you would here. And in this film, the person who is the most like, look, you're getting 100% the truth of this person. And if 100% the truth of this person is constantly helping people in his community, albeit grumpily, then that's a pretty decent person, right? It's not like he's like sort of feels like he has to do it out of some sort of like obligation or something. Like he's a decent, he's got a good heart, but he's obviously he's also got immense unhappiness and anger in his life, amongst maybe alcoholism or who knows what, and obviously depression. So yeah, I find myself very, very endeared to that character, and everyone in this movie, I think, is like just a real asset. There's something else I was going to say about him as well. It's gone from, oh yeah, so like I think the biggest clue to people like him being maybe better actors and not just like a found person that's like that is like he's obviously got this, the thing that really made him feel alive, the thing that really made him sort of bloom was his past experience as an actor in the local like productions of Playboy of the Western World and stuff. And when Johnny comes home and they do that he does that, well, it's not a monologue, it's a brief interaction between the two of them. He's fantastic, isn't he? I mean, he's electric as an actor. I don't mean that he's a great actor in the film that they may face the rising sun or whatever it's called. Again, it's, like you said, difficult title to remember. I mean, the character is also a brilliant actor as well. And we've seen this so much where it's like the forgotten people out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere that like are going to die and no one's ever heard their name, but they're a brilliant craftsperson or writer or poet or musician or whatever they might be. And especially acting, it's kind of like you can't just go down to the session and trot that out. Like he probably rarely gets to express this. It's really delightful to him to meet up with his old acting buddy. And I think when he's quite harsh and aggressive to Johnny for heading off to England, part of that is he's probably quite hurt and angered by the fact that this friend, they have such a special connection with, not just in terms of friendship, but also like as co-players in this pastime that they really both blossomed in. That guy has sort of like part of why he's lost that. No, I'm not, don't want to read too much narratively into it, but it's interesting to see him come alive in that moment. I think it's an exhibit of how the actor can't just be like a found person that they found like wandering around Connemara, going into houses and trying to find like, wrinkly old fellas. He's clearly has got the goods acting wise. And I think even Bill, who seems to be the most like authentic, that scene where he comes and explains how he's been offered to go on the old people's bus into town, and he's dropping hints, but they're not registering. And like, you can't do that if you're not a brilliant actor, I think. So yeah, I'm pretty confident they're all actors. Like you said, Johnny character is an actor that we've seen in many things over the years. And there was a few other faces that seemed familiar to me, but I'm not sure if they're like familiar to me because I've seen them in other things, or familiar to me because I've seen faces like theirs and people like them so many times. And yeah, one more other thing, you had mentioned how Joe and Kate, well, Joe specifically, had this familial tie to the area, so that they didn't just choose that area out of nothingness. What I meant when I said they've chosen to be there is like, not that I understand that he's got some sort of lineage to the area, but I more meant that like everyone else there hasn't left, and they're just sort of there by default, if you want to put it that way. It's maybe not the best way of putting it, but Joe and Kate are there because they've actually moved there, right? They've selected it, and they have option. They could be living in Paris, they could be living in New York, like they're in that kind of intelligentsia, sophisticated arts world type bubble. And of all the options available to them, they could be out in India or something. That would be inspiring for artists and writers. But they've gone, I think this would be a good place for us to be. And then what we see over the course of the film with Kate's offer to come back and take over the gallery, or it will just get disbanded, and it's obviously something she cares deeply about. When they are sort of doubling down, I love that he doesn't pressure her as well. He's like, okay, this is a decision. This is really her thing. He never even brings it up because he's clearly just sort of like quietly waiting to hear what she says. And when she says it, he's like, are you sure? Are you sure? But obviously it's a kind of dream come true to him. So yeah, I remember growing up in the Irish countryside, those two types of inhabitant sitting side by side, people who had identified that area as like the answer to their like actualizing themselves, where they want to live, where they want to be. Like it was a whole deliberate strategic process that brought them there, sat side by side and interacting with people who like it never even crossed their minds to ever be anywhere else than there. They've been there their whole life, kind of thing. And that's just like, well, I guess I could have moved 2 villages over. You know, I'd talk to people growing up and they'd be like, I'm not from around here at all. No, I'm from Kilkishen or something. And that would be like, 7 minutes drive away. And they consider themselves to have like gone on some massive like exodus from their homeland or something. So yeah, it's interesting seeing that side by side. I was saying to Vic, like when we were watching, it's like it's set in a remote rural area, but it's different to like rural India or something, where you grow up in a remote rural India. There's a very low ceiling on where you could go in the world, what you could be, economic limitations and so forth. You grow up in rural Ireland, you could absolutely be living in Boston, you could be living in Dublin, working as like a professor or something. Like it's a small country, and it's so normal to have people from different social strata, different levels of education and income, and different origins and all sorts of stuff. Yet it's still a very old-fashioned, traditional rural environment. Probably less and less so. Like we haven't been there for we've been there as visitors, but we haven't really lived in rural Ireland for decades now. But when we were living up, it's still like horse and cart and, pumps with water that you could go to the well, get some water. It's like a lot of things that you might associate with more developing countries, or you wouldn't necessarily associate with the country where the headquarters of like Google and Amazon and Facebook and all these things are. But I think that is a magic to the Irish countryside that certainly existed in our time, and obviously exists in the 70s and 80s when this film is set, where you really are communing with proper old school traditional way of living. So yeah, phenomenal movie. Really, really enjoyed it, as I said. And yeah, still haven't checked up on the director or the writers, or the author. I guess when you've got co-writers of the screenplay, you got a director of the movie, and you got an author of the novel. So you've got kind of 4 authors of this film, which I get, maybe this is the wrong way of thinking about things, but to me it's sort of like takes away the potency of, I need to check out what they've done, what else they've done, because there's so many things that have come together to make this film what it is. But that said, it's great to see great movies like this coming out of Ireland. I remember when Garage came out, I think it's 2007. It was the first really good Irish movie I'd seen. The first one that actually I could point to and I could show people, were like, this is what it was like. This is Ireland. This is recognizable to me. Not like some highly romanticized, the Braveheart treatment, where it's like, yeah, okay, there's Irish stuff going on here, some traditional Irish music in it, but this is not true to my experience at all. Whereas Garage was very much like, this is very identifiable as my country, what I came from. And that's a very bleak film. Almost nothing romantic whatsoever about that film. I think it's got to be one of the bleakest, might be the bleakest look at rural Irish life that I've ever seen. But it was the first film that I saw that was like, yeah, life in rural Ireland is so interesting and can be mined to such great dramatic depth, and is so cinematic because it's gorgeous as well. There should be more films like this, and there hasn't been that many since. The Quiet Girl was one that impressed me quite a lot, and now this one has impressed me quite a lot. So it's nice to see now we're building a little bit of a collection of films that capture what you and I actually lived through. Like, that's the main reason why it's of importance to me, because I did it for 20 years. It's nice that there's at least a couple of cultural artifacts, at least in cinema, because I don't read. So there's probably loads of books that do a good job. I've read some short stories and stuff that do a good job of bottling up that experience. But I think on screen now, thankfully, there's a handful of them.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a scene there when you were talking about the countryside of Ireland. There's a scene late on in the movie that, like anything in this movie, seems very significant, but also the most insignificant thing at the same time. And that is when the main guy, played by Barry Ward, he is writing a letter and trying to gather his thoughts. And I think somebody mentions they might be putting in a phone line or something like that. They're mentioning about the phones. And then he says, sure, there'll be no need to write a letter soon. Everyone will be talking to each other on their phone. And then there's a blink and you miss it kind of look. And a lot of this is about reading in between the spaces of the characters' expressions as much as their actions. And the writer character, he just has a look. And there's that feeling that maybe he now is continuing on the process in his journey of becoming older Ireland. And even though they're the new couple in the town, that they eventually will start to become relics, like the passage of time. And just thinking about that, it's funny, isn't it? The way that the internet has hit rural Ireland. Like, you can go to the most ruralest of places now and you can get internet, and they can connect it to your kids, connect you to anyone over in London. So much so in a Skype call, or, well, it's not Skype anymore, is it? It's probably, was it Teams or WhatsApp? But just in the newer generation who are computer literate, like my dad is 68, he's got Instagram, he's got social media. So even in the way that the internet has changed, we probably won't get a rural Ireland like this now. Even though it is as isolated, it can never be as isolated. So it is pretty interesting to think about in that way as well. And especially for this character that's the writer, that maybe his trade and his ability and the thing that he's good at will be in decline because of something like phone lines. But yeah, And regarding the Irish movies and whatnot, I remember I introduced you to Garage, that's right. And Adam and Paul, I guess, is another one, but more urban. I remember there was a spate of movies with Cillian Murphy and Colin Farrell where they were trying to copy Guy Ritchie movies and trying to copy that type of Brit gangster flavor, but that died out. And yeah, you're right, The Quiet Place is a decent movie. And set in the same universe as the Quiet Place movie apparently is Small Things Like This. I think that's what it's called. And it's starring Cillian Murphy. That's another good one. Probably in Ireland before my time, but it still has essence of things that came later. And Peter Mullen did a movie that he directed, the only movie he directed as far as I know. I think it's about the Magdalene laundrettes, again before my time, but it's in those moments where you get to see the community that there's the stuff that I recognize. So great to see. And yeah, I think this movie and movies like this, I think this movie was submitted for the Irish Academy Awards representing Ireland. So hopefully it will find an audience abroad. And let's see what else is to come from Ireland. And hopefully, I'm a big fan of Barry Ward, the actor, anyway. And I wouldn't say, because I tried to push onto you Jimmy's Hall, I wouldn't say it's as good as this by any means. It's a bit play at times, but it does have a really good story to it, a true story actually, and it is a Ken Loach movie. So I'll leave you with that, my final sell. That I'm not even telling you should watch. I'm just saying I watched it and Barry Ward was very good in it again.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.